In this video we're going to talk about how we can subtract with negative numbers. And so to kind of help make sense of it, I don't like to use the word subtract. It doesn't really make sense and we don't normally use it in normal day life. And so you're going to hear me say the word take away. And so before we start with this problem, the -4 take away -7, I want to look at how we can add -7 to -4 first. And so what we'll do is I'm going to use the stairs, and so we're going to look at this -4, so that means that we're going to face down the steps because it's negative, and we're going to walk 4 steps down. Then we're going to look to see what we're doing, and we have a -7, so we're going to continue facing down, and we're going to walk forward another 7 steps down. And then what we would see is that we would be at the 11th step below 0, or -11. Right. So when we're adding, it's as if we can imagine that we're walking forward. And so now when we look at a subtraction problem, we'll see that what we'll do is, again, we're going to start at -4, and so we're going to walk down 1, 2, 3, and 4, so we're at -4. And now this is where it can get a little confusing, but what we're going to do is we're going to look at this -7. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue looking as if we're going to walk down the steps, but paying attention to this that we're subtracting. And so when we think of adding, we're going to walk forward. Well, the opposite would be walking backwards. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to continue looking as if we're going to walk down the steps, but now we're going to walk backwards. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And so what we'll see is that we ended up on the 3rd step above 0. And so what we actually ended up doing was, instead of walking down, we ended up walking up backwards. And so we would see that -4 take away -7 would be 3. And for the second problem, we're going to take -4 away from 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this 4, and we're going to walk up to the 4th step. 4. And now with this, we're going to see that this is a negative. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look down. So I'm going to write below the steps, because now this just represents the way that we're looking down. But since this is subtracting, right, instead of walking forward, now we're going to walk backwards. And we're going to walk backwards up 4 steps. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that we'll see that we end up at +8. Another way to make sense of it also is by using our counters. And so what I'll do is I'm going to represent our -4. So there's 1, -2, -3, -4. And we're going to look at what the problem wants us to do. It wants us to take away 7 negatives. But as we can see, we only have 4 negatives to take away. And so what I can do is I can manipulate this number, and we can ask ourselves, what number can I add to any number and it still be the same? Well, that number is 0. And so we'll see that I can add a positive and a negative, and yet our number still equals -4. And so by looking at it, we can see that we have 5 negatives right now that we can take away. And we need to take away 7. And so we can go ahead and add another 0. Now we can see that we have 6 negatives that we can take away, but yet our number still equals -4. And then let's add one more 0. And now we see that we have 7 negatives to take away. And so we go ahead and now we can take the 4 negatives and our 3 negatives, and we're left with positive 3. And then this problem down here, we're going to start out with 4 positives. We're going to look to see what we need to take away. We need to take away 4 negatives, and unlike the other problem up top, we don't have any negatives to take away. And so we can go ahead and manipulate our number. So we can add 0, so a positive and a negative, and we see that we have there's 5 positives but 1 negative to take away. And so we need 3 more negatives to take away, and so we can add 3 more positives. And our number still equals 4, and the reason is because it's the same as if we have 4 plus 0. So now we can see that we have 4 negatives to take away, and so let's go ahead and there's negative 1, take away negative 2, take away negative 3, take away negative 4, and we're going to be left with 8 positives. And on this last page, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can use the counter concept to use just numbers so that we can manipulate just by using what we know. So we know that we're going to start out with negative 4. And what I need to do is we need to take away negative 7. And so what we can do is we can go ahead and add 0 to negative 4, but it's going to look a little bit different. And so we're going to add negative 3, because I know that negative 4 plus negative 3 will be negative 7. But I also have to add a positive 3 so that this is still 0. And so now what we can do is we can see that, well, here's negative 4 and negative 3. And now I can take those away. And so I need to take it away. And then what we'll be left with is just 3. And then down at the bottom, we can look at the same concept to where I'm going to start out with 4. And what I need to do is I need to take away negative 4, but we don't have negative 4 to take away, so I can add 0. And again, it's not going to look like 0, but it still equals 0. And so we're going to have 4 plus negative 4. And so this is still 4 plus 0, just like it was with the counters on the other page. But now what we can see is that we can actually take away the negative 4, since that's what the problem tells us to do. Which that take away, rather than subtract or minus, we can just take it away. And what we'll see is we're left with 4 plus 4, which is